With that, it is my great honor to welcome our next speaker, Dr. Vivek Lall. Dr. Lall is the Chief Executive of General Atomic Global Corporation and a globally respected figure in the aerospace and defense sectors. He has been associated with key advisory and industry bodies, including the US Next Gen Advisory Committee and the US-India, US-Japan Business Forums. His career stands at a testimony to what strategic cross-border collaboration can achieve. And we are privileged to have Dr. Lall with us today. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Lall for his session.
Thank you. Can you all hear me okay? Awesome. Well, thank you. It's really an honor and privilege to be here. I flew in from San Diego yesterday, and I'm heading back to San Diego tomorrow early morning. But it was well worth it. It was great to meet many of you at the dinner, and it's really an honor and privilege to talk to you today. Thank you, Professor Prabhu, for the invite, and thanks to many friends here that have, and the Dean. We had a fascinating conversation last evening. It was really great to hear James and give his geopolitical overview, so much of my speech has already been said, but especially on the US-India bit, but I'll still try and dive a little bit deeper into my sector, which is aerospace and defense, and try and relate the India story and what it could mean more globally in this sector, and certainly since I'm speaking at a university, what the relevant aspects would be for faculty and students alike. So obviously under the stellar leadership, I feel, of Prime Minister Modi, we've had a resurgent India with new standards in aerospace, ranging from fighter aircraft to transport aircraft, helicopters, aerial payload deliveries, unmanned aircraft, and in consonance, the supporting industries have seen quite a sea change, whether you're large industries, Mahindra is present here today, or you have medium, small industries, as well as startup industries. They have all seen a sea change over the last several years. And this is stemming from the policy of Atmanirbharta, where you want Make in India, and you want that echoes of those sentiments reverberate up and down the supply chain. Of course, it's heartening to also notice that self-reliance is being applied across all sectors of industrial activity, and the need to expand India's scientific and technological capabilities are being translated into action through a national thought process. India's foremost research and development institutions have significantly invested in indigenous capabilities to bolster cutting-edge high technology and advanced sciences. I've been an observer of the India story for the last 30 years, and I would say in the last recent several years, there has been quite an focus on R&D and innovation, which is absolutely essential to be able to take the next steps. And a lot of it by startups and entrepreneurism, a lot of it by relatively young Indians who have taken on the challenge to be entrepreneurs. I come from California, where that is the aspirational goal for most students graduating at the top of their colleges or schools, is they would first like to be entrepreneurs. Gone are the days that they'd like to actually join a large company as their first preference. And I see that happening in India, and that's great to see. Of course, investment in R&D is only one aspect of an effective portfolio of policies to foster innovation, spanning, you have regulatory issues, taxation issues, fiscal allocations, all that as an ecosystem has to come together. So I do believe no one country has a lock on the best ideas. If the next generation of scholars and experts, many in this room, are to improve the globe in many areas, including aerospace and defense, collaboration is absolutely essential. few words about General Atomics for those that may not know the company. It's one of the world's leading companies specializing in defense and diversified research and technology development. We have large and varied capabilities ranging from unmanned systems to electro-optical, radar, signals intelligence, and automated airborne surveillance systems. Electromagnetic products like the electromagnetic launch and recovery system off of aircraft carriers. We have several satellites in space, electromagnetic railgun, high-powered lasers, hypervelocity projectiles, power conversion systems, and something important, the other facet of national security is energy security. So fusion and fission, thermonuclear fusion research through our internationally recognized D3D facility in San Diego and international confinement programs. You may have read recently of fusion being proven by the Lawrence Livermore Labs. We were part of that team, and that will provide clean, limitless energy to the planet over time. We're also in nuclear thermal and nuclear electric propulsion. So to go from here to Mars in 45 days rather than 6 months, you need nuclear fuels, and we just proved some of that. Recently also fission reactors on the surface of Moon. When you have astronauts that are going to live on the Moon for any significant amount of time, you'll need power, so you'll need fission reactors there. So giving that brief overview of what the company does, we of course are heavily invested in India, and we're engaged in all these areas that I talked about, but essentially we are trying to grow initiatives in India with, again, large, medium, small industries as well as startup industries. An example of a strategic partnership is with Bharat Forge. We're doing some manufacturing work with them. We're doing work with Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, Bharat Electronics Limited, and so forth. But we also incubating relationships with startups, one in artificial intelligence and one in semiconductors. And the reason we're doing this is because we see great opportunity in partnering with India. And that is fundamentally something that I think is going to be very important for not just General Atomics, but many companies. I think the collaboration piece is going to be very important. You have, in the US-India case, two democracies that can lead if we collaborate in innovation. And as was mentioned, you know, India put a craft on the Moon at a budget that was less than a Hollywood movie that would take to talk about it. So frugal innovation is very critical. But the central question in defense and aerospace going forward is, what are the technologies that will change defense platforms? And I think data-driven defense technologies is where a majority of the funding is going to go in the years ahead. So what are those? We talked about artificial intelligence. I think that enhances computational military reasoning for ISR missions, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance. I think predictive maintenance is another area for military assets. Swarm technology, swarm intelligence, self-organizing intelligence systems working towards a strategic objective. Then robotics and autonomous systems, I think, is going to be very important, reducing a soldier's physical and cognitive workload while also enabling freedom of maneuver and mission success with least possible risks to the soldiers is going to be important. Big data and analytics. I think quantum computing for crypto analysis, as well as running simulations for informed decision making, is going to be highly relevant in the years ahead. I think predictive analytics not only enables early detection of threats, but also improves safety. Blockchain, I think data sharing between concerned parties. Application areas include, of course, device tracking, streamlining procurement processes, as well as ensuring supply chain security. And then 5G, 6G. I think real-time decision support systems will require hyper-converged connectivity and strong and secure data networks. So we, bottom line, have to increase situational awareness. As you looked at all the conflicts in the world that currently are ongoing, one thing is very clear. One needs persistent surveillance. And persistent surveillance through space, through air, on land, and under the water is going to be critical. And like-minded nations like US, UK, and others, India, the Quad nation structure, I think it's very important to get to a common operating picture. So I would urge, and I do urge in various forums of governments to consider that as going to be one method of collaboration that's absolutely critical. And I think given sufficient collection assets and given the geopolitics that James talked about, it is absolutely critical to have that common operating picture. What is more critical is international cooperation. And I think info sharing and intelligence and capacity building are all topics that I think are of strategic interest for several countries, including US, UK, the European community in general, and India. Of course, as you have new technologies, new AI, new products, how do you integrate it into legacy systems? Because you look at some of the warfare, it is still, you see tanks rolling in, you see people using methods from last century to conduct warfare. So you have those old methods of warfare, but then you superlay innovative technologies and autonomous systems and so forth on top of it. How do you integrate the two? That's going to be a very significant challenge for all countries, but especially to be in a networked environment and to be able to prevail over the adversary. You certainly have to keep in several factors, such as technical, operational, financial, strategic, and cultural factors, because as you know, people resist change, and so how do you get over the cultural factors of adopting new technologies? And I do think government and defense companies, people that are necessary to take the dialogue forward, have to be in regular dialogue. There has to be three things. When you look at the boardrooms of any company, what are the three most important things that board members look at, no matter which industry or sector you're in? First is transparency. You need to have line of sight, transparent understanding of what your markets are. Second is accountability. You need to be accountable for the actions, and this goes both ways. And finally, predictability. And if you cannot get those three elements right, it's very difficult to take good board decisions. And so in that, I think there'll be a lot of scope for joint research initiatives, et cetera. I think one of the key things that India has to its advantage is, of course, the demographics. And as you look at the population and you look at the rest of the century and you look at the GDP, India and the US, in taking one of the elements of what was described in geopolitics, are perfectly suited to continue that momentum. And I think India and the US are at an inflection point where it is my personal belief that the relationship will continue going forward and will accelerate, simply because a lot of the factors of common convergence are increasing as you look at the geopolitics around us. And so to get into the knowledge-based economy, I think some of the areas that are going to be very, very critical for economic prosperity, of course, are in defense, energy, and space. So if you take those three elements, and these are strategic sectors, I think it's very important. Historically, looking at the US-India relationship on defense, there were various foundational agreements that were put in place, like the LMOA, COMCASA, BECA, and these were fundamental military and strategic pacts between the two countries that allowed the relationship to move forward. And now you have approximately $25 billion of trade where it was zero, and that's growing. Mill-to-mill exercises, which is also growing. And so in that environment, there's definitely scope for more intelligence sharing, and there's scope for working on energy security, such as fusion and fission. And you've seen some changes in the nuclear policies of both countries to facilitate more cooperation. And I think in the days ahead, you'll see even more announcements in that regard. I do feel nuclear fusion is the way of the future. I think nuclear fusion, some critics would say it's always 30 years out there to actually achieve it, but I think the time is coming where all the component technology elements are coming together. And I think with the changes of involving the private sector in India, as well as the robustness of some of the technologies that are being developed in the US, I think that will lead to fusion sooner rather than later. Now, it still is a way where the physics has to be proven and the economics has to be proven and so forth. But I do think both the countries working together on nuclear fusion will certainly yield dividends. On space, I think you've seen a lot of Indian space startups providing launch capabilities, etc. I think that's going to be a very key, not only commercial space, but space defense is going to be key areas of cooperation. So as I mentioned earlier, I think in conclusion, investment in R&D is only one aspect, but a very important aspect of having an effective portfolio of policies to foster innovation. I do think it underscores the need for continued and enhanced active involvement by governments, academia, and so forth. I do think there are 6 buckets of stakeholders that have to be involved in any conversation like we're having today. The 6 buckets are the political folks, the spectrum of political folks on both sides, so a bipartisan understanding of strategically what's important. The second bucket of stakeholders are the bureaucracy. No matter what the political will is, it has to be executed by bureaucrats. And so the bureaucracy on both sides, from the US-India standpoint or any 2 countries, is going to be very important. The third is academia, often the unsung heroes, but they are the brains behind a lot of the org charts that form all these policies. The fourth is the industry captains, and not just the large, but also, as I mentioned, the startup community. The fifth is the end user. At the end of the day, if the people or the users of all the collaboration do not want that particular product or service, then it really doesn't matter to launch off on some of those other events. And finally, and a very critical one of this, is the media, the narrative, the positioning in the global communications, whether soft or hard, is very critical for getting anything done. And to repeat, no one country has a lock on any ideas. And it's not only the ideas, but the execution of the ideas. So if this next generation of scholars represented in this room are to save the globe, so to speak, no one country can do it. Collaboration is absolutely essential. And I think countries are perfectly positioned right now to lead the way. As a final thought, since I am in a university environment right now, oftentimes I'm asked, and so I'm preempting any questions, what does the future workforce look like? What do leaders look like in the future workforce? And relative to my experience in the US-India corridor, there are a few things that I came up with that are important for future leaders, and I know many of the students here have had rich backgrounds and going on to the next phase of their careers. But the first thing I think is so critical is adaptability. To be adaptable to the ever-changing environment, which, 30 years ago, as Dean rightly said, it was a different environment. We worked under different geopolitics at that time. But now to be adaptable, the ability to learn and frankly unlearn and relearn will be crucial. The second, digital literacy. I can't overstress that enough, but digital literacy is going to be critical. And I'm not just talking about the West or India, but more globally. That is going to be important. Third is upskilling. No matter whether you're at the early stage of your career or towards the end of the career, upskilling is going to be a big focus, I think, in the coming years. And so organizations and leaders, and we do that within our organization too, should not shy away from investing to upskill with the evolving technologies. The fourth is collaboration and interdisciplinary skills. So gone are the days where you can be a pure mechanical engineer or a pure aerospace engineer and expect a career just to focus in on that area. You definitely need interdisciplinary skills to thrive. The fifth is emotional intelligence. So as automation increases, I think EQ becomes even more valuable. And I think empathy, communication, and understanding will differentiate successful leaders in business as compared to those that don't have that. Then I think resilience. I think the future workforce will face disruptions, failures, and setbacks, frankly, at a routine pace. And resilience will help individuals bounce back and thrive. And finally, we can't stress this enough, ethical decision-making and integrity is the bedrock of all future business. And I think a lot of companies and individuals falter on that, no matter how successful they are. But that is often not taught, and it's often something that's overlooked, but that has to be ingrained on a daily basis. Every leader makes 2 or 3 important decisions a day, and it has to go through the prism of ethics and integrity as we do that. So with that, I thank you. It recently, I've been appointed as a visiting fellow here, so I'd love to collaborate with Cambridge in any capacity I can and help with the dialogue. Thank you so much.